Please welcome Dr. Milton Saier. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to take you on a short environmental journey, and we're going to be accompanied by three wonderful environmental teachers. The first, Paul Dayton from the Scripps Institute of Oceanography. The second, Jared Diamond from UCLA. And the third, John Singer from UCSD. So first, Paul Dayton, and we're going to talk about the history of marine life in the San Diego area. So once upon a time, not very long ago, large fish were caught regularly off the San Diego coast. Here we see 6 fishermen who caught 6 large cowcod, each of them being about 6 feet long. That was 1925. And here, 20 years earlier, we see Sam Bimbo with his daily catch of sea bass, 4 large sea bass. Now, Sam is a rather portly fellow, or was, but all 4 of his sea bass weigh much more than he does. And here we have Wally Potts swimming comfortably alongside this slow-moving bass. It looks like he's going to get to know that bass, but no, he had other things in mind. He caught 2 that day. And this is what Point Loma used to look like, with fishing boats everywhere. Has anyone seen a fishing boat off of Point Loma in the last few years? None. There are no fish left. Now we're going to talk about green turtles. Green turtles in the 1920s were canned. San Diego was a canning center for turtle soup. Huge green turtles were numerous in the San Diego Bay and the surrounding areas. After depleting the supply, the canneries went bust. No one has seen a full-size green turtle in the area for decades. This is what they look like. That boat is going to take them back to shore, where they're going to be put in a holding pond so that they can process turtle soup 24 hours a day, every day, regardless of weather. And now we turn to California lobsters. Large California lobsters were still plentiful in the San Diego area in the 40s and 50s. They were caught for their tails, just their tails, which were canned. The San Diego Historical Society photographed huge fields of lobster skeletons piled up to 3 feet deep and stretching for acres. Today, a lobster is caught on the average 8 times before it's large enough to keep. The largest specimen found today are only a quarter of their mature size. This slide shows the sizes of mature lobsters. None of you have seen a lobster that size. And this shows 1 day's catch. They will all be processed by morning. Now we're going to talk about abalone. In the early 50s, the ocean bottom was covered with abalone. A competent commercial diver could get up to 2 tons of abalone in one dive. 5 species were prevalent: the whites, reds, pinks, greens, and blacks. Today, only the reds are left, and their population is estimated to be less than 1% of what it was pre-exploitation. No one has seen a white abalone in this area for years, and the greens and blacks are in serious trouble. This is what the bottom of the ocean used to look like. And this is what happened to them. These are drying trays, and after they've dried, they'll be shipped off to Japan. This graph shows how much abalone was caught per year. And note that the landings indicated are millions of tons. And we're up above 1,000. So at least 1 billion tons were caught until the abalone were depleted. Now we turn to Jared Diamond, and we see one of the Egyptian pyramids, one of the 7 wonders of the world. And we assume there must have been an incredibly advanced civilization to be able to muster up the effort necessary to construct this pyramid. And here we have the Mayan ruins. Again, a civilization must have risen to prominence and then disappeared. So to understand this rise and fall of civilizations, we turn to Easter Island, the most remote spot on Earth. It was discovered by the Dutch explorer Jacob Roggeveen in 1722. And what did he find there? He found a barren grassland without a single tree of any size. There were around 2,000 people speaking a Polynesian language. They identified only 47 species of plants, all small. And the only native animals they found were insects. But around the periphery of the island, they found 300 statues erected along the coast. Some of them were as high as 33 feet, and they weighed up to 82 tons. And there were twice as many inland. No one understood how they got there until in 1960, the Swiss writer Erich von Däniken wrote, "They had to be the work of extraterrestrial astronauts with ultra-modern tools who became stranded on Easter Island and were finally rescued without leaving a trace of themselves." But we turn to archaeology. Radiocarbon dates estimate that humans first reached the island around 400 AD. Now, if you want to know something about a past civilization, turn to their garbage heaps. And the garbage heaps have told us that the early Easter Islanders subsisted on fish, dolphin, and seabirds. A mystery was solved when they discovered there had once been palms on the island. The palms were used to make canoes, which allowed them to hunt the dolphins. They also provided rollers to move the statues from the quarries in the center of the island to the coast. And they had ropes to erect the massive statues, and they also had firewood. The population was estimated to have been around 10,000, maybe as much as 20,000 at its peak, at around 1400 AD. So there were plenty of people to carve and erect the statues. But where did the trees go? Pollen analysis showed that the palm populations declined already by 800 AD, and just after 1400 AD, the last of the palms disappeared. So what happened to the trees? Well, forests were cleared to plant gardens and build canoes, and to transport and erect the statues. Native birds responsible for pollinating the tree's flowers and dispersing the fruits had disappeared. And there was a disastrous effect on food. No more canoes meant that they couldn't hunt the dolphins in quantity. And dolphin bones disappeared from the garbage heaps just around 1500 AD. Land birds, large sea snails, and many other seabirds disappeared. The consequence was warfare and cannibalism. Rival clans began to fight for the dwindling resources. Spear points littered the landscape for the first time in the history of Easter Island. Statues were pulled down by warring factions. People took to living in caves for protection against their enemies, although there had never been enemies on the island before. As resources dwindled, people turned to the only sources of protein left. First rat bones, and then human bones began to make up a larger portion of the bones in the garbage heaps. And, as you might expect for a people who was eating their neighbors, there was a population crash. 1400, remember, there were about 10,000 people. By the time Roggeveen came along and discovered the island, it was down to 2,000. By 1900, the population was 111 people. Now we turn to another civilization. Chaco Canyon's Pueblo was the largest structure ever built in North America until the 19th century skyscrapers. There were 650 rooms, and it was 5 stories high. Archaeologists have established that construction began around 900 AD. Occupation, however, ended in the 12th century. So why did they build the city in the middle of a desert? And where did they get the materials, particularly the 200,000 16-foot-long beams that supported the roofs? And why did they abandon it after putting so much effort into it? The truth was, it had once been a lush forest. The damaged ecosystem was no longer able to support a large number of crops. While natural climate change in the form of a drought was once thought to have been the reason for the abandonment of Chaco Canyon, it's now clear that extreme damage to the resource base was the primary cause. So now we turn to the Middle East, the birthplace of Western civilization. Agriculture, animal domestication, and writing were developed there, although they were developed elsewhere as well. This area of the world was called the Fertile Crescent, implying an area of abundance. The Middle East and Mediterranean were once a lush mosaic of wooded hills and fertile valleys. So what happened to the Fertile Crescent? Thousands of years of deforestation, overgrazing, and erosion transformed this Garden of Eden into a dry, desolate expanse. This theory of environmental destruction is supported by most contemporary accounts and by virtually all of the archaeological evidence. Now we look at Petra, made famous in the US by Indiana Jones and The Last Crusade, a great movie. Once a thriving commercial center which controlled trade between Europe, Arabia, and the Orient, it now lies in ruins among the sands. And there was a shift of power. First, the Middle East. After the Middle East had exploited its environment, power moved to Greece, and then Rome, and then Western and Northern Europe. Today, the US, Europe, and parts of Asia are the primary resource users. But we're not just exploiting the resources of our own area. We have world economy and globalization. With the advent of modern international trade and shipping, we're no longer limited to using just those resources at hand. Our population keeps increasing at a tremendous rate, and so does our consumption of resources. We're now capable of literally creating an economic and societal collapse of the entire world, similar to Easter Island. This just shows the consequences of human presence. We're looking at certain dangerous molecules that exist in the atmosphere. And you'll note that these concentrations were quite stable for hundreds of years, in fact, thousands of years, until the Industrial Revolution, when the human population went into exponential growth. At the same time, carbon dioxide concentrations, nitrous oxide concentrations, methane concentrations, and sulfate aerosols went up in parallel with the human population. Fortunately, though global warming is of major concern, we have a temperature buffer. We'll look at Glacier National Park. In 1900, there were 150 glaciers in this park, and they had been there since the Stone Age. Today, we have 28 glaciers left. In 20 years, there will be no glaciers. They're going to have to change the name to No Glacier National Park. Worldwide, we're losing our ice caps and glaciers. Their loss is clearly related to human activities. When they're gone, atmospheric temperatures will skyrocket. Here is Glacier National Park in Montana. Where are the glaciers? They're down in the pool. Now we're going to make a few observations. One species, we won't say which one, but one species is destroying the environment for all living species on Earth. That one species causes the extinction of an estimated 30,000 species per year, or 8,000 known species. The population of that one species is far in excess of what the Earth can sustain. That one species is bringing about its own eventual extinction. Yet, that one species values and protects its own members above all others, an apparent contradiction in terms. So now we're going to make some critical conclusions and ask a few questions. First, man is a cancer to planet Earth. You've heard it before, you'll hear it many times again. The only cure involves population reduction. Irrational thought prevents implementation of that cure. The question isn't whether there's intelligent life in outer space, but whether there's intelligent life on Earth. Can we act rationally? Can we control our population? Can we fit into nature without destroying her? Here are the statistics on overpopulation. The world's population is now about 6.8 billion, and it's expanding rapidly. Every day we share the Earth and its resources with over 200,000 More people than the day before. That's births over deaths. Every year, there's about another 83 million more mouths that need to be fed. It's the equivalent of adding all the people in San Diego to the world population every week, the people of Los Angeles every 2 or 3 weeks, almost all the people in Mexico every year, and all the people in North America every 4 years. So now we turn to the World Health Organization. They tell us that 100 million human couples have sexual intercourse every day. Now that sounds like a lot of fun, but I'll tell you there are consequences. 1 million of these result in conception. Half of those are unplanned, and a quarter of them are unwanted. 1/10 result in attempted abortion. That's 100,000 abortions. 1/3 of the attempted abortions are illegal, and as a consequence, over 1,000 women lose their lives from these illegal abortions every day. Now we turn to the philosopher, Karl Gerassi. Most cultures, he says, in most cultures, social ideology favors reproduction. After all, parents of young people want grandchildren. Young people strive to fit in. Social and religious institutions promote the one traditional lifestyle. Many industrial enterprises benefit from an increase in population. Others play on the family theme. Alternative lifestyles are ridiculed, and the psychological health of individuals is not considered. So we need reverse propaganda. We need to counteract parental pressures. Don't listen to your parents. Peer pressure. Don't listen to your friends. Archaic social and religious institutions. You know who not to listen to. Your politicians and ministers. Commercial propaganda. Don't read those ads. And we need to promote personal freedom, individual mental health, diverse lifestyles, and above all, social responsibility. We need population reduction in order to prevent human suffering, curtail species extinction, minimize global warming, minimize environmental pollution, and prevent eventual human extinction. So we need to restrict the birth rate. The only effective and humane way to reduce the human population is to restrict birth worldwide. Possible approaches include education of world citizens about birth control, encouragement of alternative lifestyles that don't involve procreation, making birth control methods freely available to everyone, even the poor, making abortion freely available to all world citizens, and restricting family size by any of several methods. Perhaps most reasonable is requiring qualification testing for parenthood. Yes, we adopted our second child, and they had us go through 9 months of qualification testing. Why not everyone? But some people won't be able to relate to the rationale approach, and so we need the slogan or emotional approach. For example, regarding overpopulation, protect the earth, don't give birth. Stressing reproductive choice, maybe no baby. To promote creative lifestyles, create, don't procreate. And to promote leadership qualities, be a leader, not a breeder. So, is there potential for a world community? All human beings belong to one species and are greater than 99% identical at the genetic level. Yet we're constantly in conflict as individuals, as families, as countries, and as groups of similar religious faith. The 4 great social evils that hinder formation of an effective world community are God, country, family, and ego. These are the forces that divide us. Now we turn to John Singer for his view on irrationality. The Gallup poll conducted in 1980 showed that 50% of Americans believe that God created man within the past 10,000 years. 41% believe that God created man before this time. Only 9% believe the scientific evidence that man appeared in an evolutionary process. The theory of evolution is as well established as the atomic theory and the wave particle theory. Thus, John concludes, less than 10% of Americans can be considered to be rationalists. It's unlikely the percentages are much higher in other intellectually underdeveloped countries of the world. He goes on about irrationality. Primitive people's pre-scientific views of the world are represented by over 10,000 different mythological treatises and religions. These religions conflict regarding origins of the world, the biosphere, and man, the existence of multiple gods, one God or no God, reincarnation, a heaven and hell, or an elevated spirit, the nature and existence of spirits, devils, and ghosts. So John concludes, religious writings represent mythological or fairy tale views of the world. Now, about rationality. Rationality is a vital and exhilarating part of life that's too little appreciated in society. Unfortunately, rationalists must cope with a decidedly irrational world. Rationalists should reveal their identities and come out of the closet. As our most competent leaders, they must strive to reveal the truth and the way, even if the world around them disparages their power of reason. Finally, last slide, one's life is not an isolated mystery with no bonds to a past or a future, nor is it beholden to some mythical deity. On the contrary, each human life, no less than the stars, is an integral part of a real and gloriously complex universe with near infinities of time and space surrounding and connecting it. Thank you all.